Hello all my JavaScript friends, this is the Virtuoid, aka Mike Smith, and this is Fun with JavaScript, our racing game. This is where we left off with our last video. Our little car with our funky looking wheels sliding off into oblivion. So now let's put a body on the car. First thing I'm going to want to do is let's go ahead and let's take the rotation off of the ground so it will stay on the ground just a little bit longer than we would like for it to. So there we go. Cool. Did I say that right? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Alrighty, so now it's on the ground. Let's see what we need to do. First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the wheelbase disappear. And by doing that, all I have to do is go into car base, go into where I add the wheelbase, and set the is visible to false. And that will make it disappear. Let's check it out. And sure enough, it's gone. Yep, see, it's supposed to be right there. It's not there anymore. So originally I had two pieces to the body. I had what I called the chassis and the body itself. And I replaced the body with the model eventually. I don't think I really need both of them, but for right now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and still put both the chassis and the body on there because that's what I've got with my POC, so I don't want to try to, throw anything new inside of here. So let's go ahead and throw in the chassis first. So let's get some code inside there. Okay, as you can tell at the very beginning here, our defaults, we already had the chassis because we needed that to be able to determine where the wheelbase or the pivots are going to go outside of the wheelbase. So that has already been there. So the next thing we're going to do here, let's pop in our private variable. We'll call it chassis. Why not? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do here is that notice here we've set the defaults on the instance itself. So now we need to pop the chassis on there. So let's get that chassis. And there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and add the restitution down here like I did with the others, which is really the only thing that I have changed from what you find currently on the there it is, restitution. What you currently find on the GitHub thing, which by the way, you can see that down below there. You can go to our GitHub library, FWJS.race, excuse me. It is a free, a public library. You will want to go to the branch release/0.0.3. That is the branch that the POC was developed on, and that's the one that I'm using here for this particular demonstration, or for these videos, excuse me. So again, that's FWJS.-race off the Virtuoid GitHub account. And it's the branch is release/0.0.3. Okay, so we got that in there. Let's go ahead now and go to our build section. So now we got to be able to build the chassis. So let's go ahead and put that in there. Okay, and there we go. We've now added the chassis into the build. And basically what we're going to have is we're going to have a add chassis routine, which I'll be adding here just shortly, just like we did with the add wheelbase right at the very top here. And we're passing the chassis into the set physics because eventually we're going to set physics onto the chassis. But there's one more thing I want to add here, and I didn't put this in initially because I want to see, I want to basically show you what's going on. Is that if you remember correctly in our last video, all of the joints are connected up to the wheelbase. In fact, let's just go to that code real quick. So this is where I created the joint on each wheel, and that wheel, the wheel itself, along with the joint, is added to the wheelbase. Well, the wheelbase is basically going to be the parent node, if you want to put it that way, for all of the car itself. So what I need to do now on this build is I do need to connect the chassis to the wheelbase. So I need to add the chassis to the wheelbase, and I do that by adding it as a child. So now the wheelbase is going to become the parent for the entire car. And that's not a big deal there. I just wanted to show that to you. So notice that color itself is not been defined. That gets popped in through here, so we need to do comma color. That's going to go to this dot color. But now we need to back all this out because this dot color is not defined. So where does that get defined? That gets defined up here inside the constructor. So we're going to pass the color, and we're going to say this dot color equals color, and we're going to add color to our base of operations at the very top there. I got a couple extra spaces there. Okay, so we've got all that done. We got the color done, so that should pass the color correctly. And so now we really just need to do is pop in the add chassis. And luckily that's a very, very easy, simple, and quick routine. And there it is. So the chassis is very simple. I'm passing the name, the scene, the position, color, which is exactly what we're passing right here. We put the face colors on there. We add the chassis information. We get the depth, height, and width of the chassis. We create ourselves a box using face colors. This basically allows us to color the mesh. We position it and we make it visible false. Now by default it's false. That's because basically we're going to eventually put a model on top of it. But in this case we're going to want to make it true. So because we want to be able to see the chassis. So we pop the chassis inside there. We return the chassis. We return the chassis up to, yeah, here it is. We add it to the wheelbase, which is very important. The wheelbase is the parent mesh of our car. We pass it into the set physics, get it back out, and save it. So the last thing we should be able to need to do here is now do the set physics. And that's just going to be a very, very simple thing. First of all, we need to be able to set up our constants at the very top. So we're getting our mass, friction, and we're going to need to get restitution now too. Restitution. That will be chassis restitution. I hope I spelled that all right. So that gets chassis mass, chassis friction, and chassis restitution from the default chassis. Now we just need to add that physics imposter in. So we come down here. We pop it before the wheelbase, and bingo, chassis physics inspector equals new physics inspector. It's going to be a box. It's a simple box. So there's the friction. Let's change that restitution to now be chassis restitution. Now notice that I've got an underline here. My IDE is telling me, hey, you don't have chassis. Well, that's correct because we haven't passed it in there yet. So let's put chassis inside there as coming in from the arguments. And let's return chassis down at the very bottom. And technically that should be it. And we'll check the code here real quick to make sure. And yep, that looks like it's all there. So let's save it. Let's see if I haven't messed something up. Let's see what comes out. And there we go. So the only thing we don't have is the color. So we're going to need to pass the color in as an argument for our car. So let's go back over to test car and let's pass it in a color. What we'll do here is we'll type in color. We'll just do color there. We'll just say constant color equals color 3 dot green. This is color 3 is reserved from Babylon. We need to import it, and that will give us a green color automatically. So if we save that, we're now passing color. It should turn green, and it does. So there's the chassis of our car. Basically, it's the undercarriage, if you want to call it that. I originally called it chassis, and off we go. So we've added the chassis on there. Let's add the box that goes on top of it. So let's go ahead and add that in next. First of all, I need to define it within the defaults up here inside box. So we've got that all situated. We need to put a private variable there called box. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set it inside our this.defaults. So let's copy paste information inside there. And the thing I'm going to have to add here again is the restitution at the very end. You know, you think I would have been smart enough to have gone on ahead and done this in the, whoops, this would be box. Gone ahead and done this inside of the FWJS.race repository instead of having to do this each and every single time. But yeah, there we are. That's the way it goes. All right, so that gets that added inside there. Next thing we want to do is let's build it out. So the first thing we're going to do is just like with the add chassis there, we're going to add ourselves a box, and we're passing a name, scene, position, color, and a rotate variable. Aha, that's something different here. We'll tell you about that in just a second. And a scaling variable, which in this case we're going to set the scale. We're going to use the scale, but we're going to add 0.2 at the very end. And honestly, I can't remember why I did that, but it just looked okay. That's the way it goes. All right, we're going to need to add to just like we added the chassis to the wheelbase, we're going to need to add the box to the wheelbase. And we're going to need to be able to pass the box and receive the box from the physics. So let's put our box on either side of the set physics. And of course we need to save it. This box equals box. Okay. All right, well, let's take a look at that rotate before we do anything else. Okay, so rotate comes in from the construction. Now we're saving our rotate here. We got rotate right there, so we need to go back up here. We need to put this dot rotate equals rotate, and we need to put the word rotate here. And then finally we need to add it to our private variables. So what does rotate do? It allows us to manually rotate the box. And that's very important, that if we've got a really strange model, we may have to rotate it a little bit here or a little bit there. One thing I forgot to mention is that we need to default it to 0, and actually we also need to multiply it by math.pi divided by 180. All right, looks like we got rotate now added in, so now we need to pop our add box inside there. So let's bring up the add box code. And there's the add box code. But something a little bit different here. Notice instead of just adding chassis and just adding a box in there, what we're actually now doing is we're returning we're returning the results of a public method called add modal. So add model here is going to basically build the model itself. And what will happen is that when we add when we get an actual model out there, of the Tesla truck or of another simple car that I found online there, they will have their own add model routine, so that when this program calls add box, it will either just add a box if nothing has been declared, or if we have a car class that has been extended from this class, then we will automatically get that particular car to replace the box. And so it's very, very simple here. There's really not a whole heck of a lot that we've got here. There is a set telemetry mesh that we're going to need to do, and we'll add that right there. So what exactly does this do? Well, actually we need to add our telemetry mesh. So let's back up to the very top. There we go. So what exactly does set telemetry mesh does? Well, what it does is it tells the system, the system that's running the race, the engine, that basically this is the mesh to look at in the car if you need to determine something has happened. Like, for instance, if we need to determine who's in first, who's in second, who's in third, or who's in fourth, or most importantly, at what point have they crossed the finish line. This finish line is basically got a little marker on it that says, okay, when this marker interacts with a particular mesh on the car, that's when we know this car has crossed the finish line. So what the engine needs to know is, okay, model, what mesh do we need to look at to figure out if it's crossed the finish line or not? Now, for our super basic car, it's just a simple box, that's it. But for things like the Tesla truck and all that, we can't do the wheels, or we can't do, the back bumpers. It's got to be the main system, or the main body, or it's got to be the front bumper. Whatever mesh that happens to be, that's the mesh that it needs to know. It needs to know about to be able to determine who's in first, who's in second, or who's crossed the finish line first, second, third, or fourth. So in this case, we're setting our telemetry mesh to be the box that we have just created. And so technically, this should all work. Technically. I don't think I've forgotten anything. I'm going to check here real quick. Yep, I have forgotten something. I've completely forgot about adding it into the physics. Woo! That would have been horrible if we tried to test this thing. So let's add box in for the arguments, and let's add box to get to be set back out. All right, let's pop in our constants at the very top. There's our constants, and we're now going to, well, actually, I'm not worried. We're not going to add the restitution here, but let's go ahead and pop it in there. Restitution will be the box restitution. Did I spell that right? Yeah, I spelled it right. Okay, let's pop in the physics imposter. We'll put that at the very top here. All right, restitution is now called box restitution. Make sure I still haven't forgotten anything. Nope, I think that's got it. So let's save it and let's cross our fingers that I haven't messed something up. I didn't. There it is. Da, 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 da. So that is it. There we go. And there it goes. Let's refresh. I was trying to get it where we could see it a little bit better. Whee! Uh-oh, I lost it. All right, let's refresh again. Sorry, I lost that one. Man, I am not doing well at all here. Let's try that again. All right, one more time. There we go. So you can see the little undercarriage there. You can see the box. And you can see the wheels are still turning. So that is our basic car. All of the other models are based upon this car. So what will happen, let me go back to the code here real quick. What will happen is that if we get, let's say, the Tesla truck later on, this will be the next video, it won't be this video. It will replace the add model here. So it will replace this particular piece of code here, and it will determine which mesh is going to be the mesh that's going to determine for, or it's going to have for the telemetry. So they know at what point it crossed the finish line. What will also happen is that all of the other meshes, the add model, the box mesh here, the chassis mesh, and all the wheel meshes, all the visibility will be set to false. And that will basically allow us to, to mask these particular physics imposters to be able to represent wheels or represent bodies or anything like that. Now, the only time you may not want to do this, especially for the wheels, is if you happen to have a mesh in which each wheel is separate. And if that's the case, you'll want to say is wheel visible, and then basically try to get the wheel to maneuver itself into certain, to basically change the wheel and you want to get the wheel to basically change its position based upon where the model is. I don't have a model like that. The wheels don't exactly turn. Maybe we can find one when we do the video next time. But that's basically that's really all there is to this particular thing. And of course, it can be any color I want. All I have to do is just go inside here and change the color. How about red? And bingo, it's red. So, works like a champ. There you go. And that's really all there is to adding the body to the car. We now actually have a working car. In fact, let's take a look at, go back into the game itself here. The first four cars here are the cars that have the models applied to them. The last four cars have the stock applied to them. So let's pop the last four cars in and let's race. And it can't be found. Oh, and of course, the reason it can't be found is that because this is the live. This is the live repository that I'm using, and of course, the live repository. We haven't done the track yet or anything like that. So give me 1 second and let me set everything up to go with the FWJS race. Okay, now I've got the dev server on the FWJS race and not the live race repository. So now it should work like a champ. So let's put those last four in there. Let's click on race. There they are. And that's what they look like when they're actually on the track. You want to see them race? Let me make a change here. I have it system be able to try to debug things. I can tell the system to run the cars or not. So I'm going to change a flag on the FWJS to run the cars. So we save it. It helped if I typed the word true instead of the word run. All right, we save it. There they are. That's what the block cars look like. And there they go. Now notice there's no wheels there because like, the wheels are still set to false on with the thing I was working with here, the model. So it looks like that white might win, no purple might win. Oh yeah, pink piranha, white wallaby. So this is where, when I said that telemetry mesh, that's where it comes in handy, because the finish line here has that little green line. You can think of it as like a laser line that goes across there that basically detects when the mesh has crossed the green line, just like you can see the cyan one crossing it right now. And so that's how it determines who wins the race. Let's just race it one more time. So this is what the block cars look like when they're actually racing on our little POC test track. Oh, he blocked them out. Oh, it looks like, yeah, looks like Pink Piranha won this time. Anyway, and that's all there is to getting our base car class all set up. We'll use this base car class to do the models, which is our next video, which will be the last video we'll do for the cars before we actually do the track. If you like this video, please click on the like button below, subscribe to this channel, or leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. We're trying to get to 1 million subscribers by February of 2042, so anything you can do would be greatly appreciated. Again, thank you very much for watching. This is the Virtuoid, aka Mike Smith. We'll see you later.